Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to have the opportunity to talk with you today. Before I begin, I do want to give a small disclaimer because I will be talking about some medical information. I am not a licensed medical professional, and if you do have any questions about your own health, I do suggest you talk to your personal practitioner. With that was a lovely introduction. I am a student here studying nutrition and dietetics, but this wasn't when I was first introduced to nutrition. Throughout my childhood and into adolescence, I struggled with epilepsy, and I would have dozens of seizures a day. When I was 12 years old, my parents decided to take a little bit of a different route of treatment and try something functional, which was the ketogenic diet. This medically restrictive diet was actually my introduction to the idea that nutrition could have direct impact on brain function. Later on, once I did become a blue hen, I had the lovely opportunity of doing research under Dr. Xiao Chai. I worked on 3 research studies here at UD, and they all worked with postmenopausal women and their hormone levels. On these projects, I learned that nutrition impacts different populations in different ways, and we can use food and different types of food with different healing properties to help specific populations. And once I started asking more questions and getting curious about that, I became really fascinated with one group of people in particular, and that is those struggling with substance abuse disorder. It's no mystery to anyone that the US has a large narcotic epidemic going on right now. But when we do talk about this problem, it seems kind of scary. So there's a large sense of otherness that comes up, and I think that has to do with the extreme nature of addiction itself. But in actuality, close to 1 in 5 Americans in their lifetime will struggle with substance abuse. And what that means is that every single person in the audience right now, if you yourself have not struggled or are struggling, know someone who has or is. And that could be your brother, or your daughter, or best friend, even a math teacher. I'm not here today, though, just to lecture you on statistics. I'm not here today just to talk about how the ACA cites that 20.4 million Americans in the last year struggled with not only substance abuse disorder, but also a co-occurring mental health disorder. Or how the relapse rate is between 40 and 60%. Or even the horrifying figure that just in 2023 alone, there were over 105,000 deaths from overdose on fentanyl. I'm actually here to talk about another thing that connects us all, and that's food. And the way that food, specifically micronutrients and electrolytes, could have a healing role to play in substance abuse rehabilitation. When I was writing this talk, I got to read a lot of research papers, and I love reading research papers. I looked at numbers and figures and stats, and I turned it into something that I could understand. But reading over it, I realized the next step would be turning it into something that a group of people probably not so obsessed in nutrition research could also understand and enjoy. Luckily, I had plenty of time to do this because right smack in the middle of writing this talk, I got extremely ill. And like every fall, doctors could not explain it. I didn't have strep, I didn't have the flu, I didn't have COVID. I did have a 102-degree fever. My throat did feel like my cat had been clawing at it, and I had a pounding migraine that would not stop. I was definitely sick. And when we don't have a diagnosis, the prescription is pretty universal, and that is get good quality sleep and choose easy to digest, nourishing foods. So if I could have some audience participation, if everyone could just shout out to me, when you're sick and feel like you're on death's door like I did, what do you reach for? What's the first thing in your pantry? Yeah. So pretty much everyone said soup, which is my favorite too. I love chicken noodle soup. And it really is so cool how just one dish, right, can be so nostalgic and have such healing properties. And it almost seems like magic. But it's not. It's sodium. And that may seem kind of shocking because we're told to stay away from sodium, but it's an essential electrolyte. Electrolytes are minerals our body needs to operate in optimal function. And sodium is the first depleted micronutrient when we're sick. And that is due to inflammation and dehydration. Electrolyte imbalance is no fun. Symptoms include chronic fatigue, muscle weakness, easy fracture, and in the worst of cases, seizures. 20% of people currently in substance abuse rehabilitation are suffering from electrolyte imbalance. And what this means is that even after they do the really hard work of stopping the substance that they've been abusing, they may still suffer horrific side effects. While I'm still talking about food, I now have another question, and everybody can raise their hand for this one just so I can get a good number. But how many people have heard the phrase, "You are what you eat"? Awesome. That was the answer I was looking for. Everyone. It's a pretty common phrase, but I want to add a little twist onto that. You aren't what you eat. You are what you absorb. On a molecular level, our body needs 3 macronutrients and a multitude of micronutrients to function. And that is a conversation in itself, but a brief overview is that every macronutrient and micronutrient plays a necessary function in our body. And if we are not getting that, or we are not absorbing that, our body cannot perform that vital function. Alcohol specifically messes with calcium absorption. And we do know that calcium is really important because we were all shown 1,000,001 milk ads and forced to finish our cup of milk at the dinner table when we were kids. But that's because it's really important in bone health. And when calcium can't be absorbed, that leads to porous bones, which leads to osteopenia and eventually osteoporosis, as well as easy fractures. It's no joke, and it's not something that we should worry about for a very, very long time. But the reality is, many people do. With cocaine specifically, people who suffer from cocaine addiction specifically deal with vitamin B1 deficiency. Vitamin B1 is also known as thiamine. And symptoms of this deficiency and malabsorption they directly resemble Wernicke's enkelopathy. Wernicke's enkelopathy looks like early onset Alzheimer's. So this includes altered mental status, fatigue, nerve failure, muscle failure, and if we let this progress, it can eventually lead to coma and death. Both of these studies are from the NIH, and the NIH also found that people suffering from addiction all around struggle with nutrient absorption as a whole, which means that they also struggle getting the macronutrients they need, and that includes protein. And a lot of the times when we think of protein, we think of the muscle-building nutrient, right? We get all jacked and strong from it. But it's also really important in hormone function, which are controlled by our thyroid. So when addicts can't absorb the protein they need, all of their hormones are very negatively affected. And this causes major sexual dysfunction. And yeah, that's uncomfy and doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but it is. Because for any addict assigned female at birth, that can mean infertility. Which means not only does the addiction affect the current generation going through it, but may affect whether even generations can come after. Narcotic use as a whole causes chronic inflammation to the body and major changes to the metabolic systems that we need. And unfortunately, no amount of chicken noodle soup can cure this. To wrap up this talk, once we have this information, we do need to know how to implement it into the current treatment method that America uses. And to do so, I think we as a society need to keep 2 things in mind. The first being that this problem needs to be a priority. There are a lot of people struggling, and addiction can affect anyone at any time. Before an addict was an addict, they were someone's friend, someone's sister, and someone's loved one. And they still are. And we need to remember that in order to remove the stigma around this conversation. Secondly, when addressing addiction as a whole, we often just treat the root cause. We just treat the symptom of the substance someone is abusing. But we have to not just look at the actual behavior, but at the symptoms that come after. Because if we can work on healing the symptoms that come after, the malnutrition, the uncomfortable experiences these people are going through, then we can drastically reduce the risk of relapse and thus lead people on a path to long-lasting healing and recovery. Thank you so much for listening to me talk tonight.